It's your time to step down, Della. Ron and I are moving in, and it's only fair you find a smaller place, now that you're alone. Marla said with a deceptive sweetness that didn't quite reach her eyes. The words hung in the air like a bitter aftertaste, shattering the illusion of our supposedly happy family gathering. I struggled to maintain my composure, my heart thumping as I glanced at the smug expressions of my stepdaughter and her new husband. Greg's untimely passing had left a void in our lives, and I'd naively hoped we could move forward as a united family. But Marla's announcement made it painfully clear that she had ulterior motives, her eyes glinting with a sense of entitlement that sent a chill down my spine. I appreciate your concern, Marla, I replied, forcing a tight smile. But this is still my home, and I have no intentions of leaving any time soon. Ron cleared his throat, leaning back in his chair with an air of smugness. Well, the way I see it, you're just a temporary guest here. Greg left this place for his blood family, not some stepmom he picked up later in life. My jaw clenched at his disrespectful tone, but I refused to take the bait. Greg's will had been frustratingly ambiguous regarding the house, a loophole I knew Marla would exploit with her cunning manipulations. That's enough, Ron, I said firmly, meeting Marla's gaze with unwavering resolve. I think it's best if you two leave. We'll discuss this another time, preferably with cooler heads. Marla's lips curled into a sneer as she rose from her chair, her eyes narrowing with disdain. Don't think for a second that I'll let this go, Della. This is my rightful inheritance, and I won't let you stand in my way. As they stormed out, the weight of Marla's words sank in, triggering a flood of memories from our past confrontations. She had always been a master manipulator, playing the victim while subtly undermining my relationship with Greg. And now, with him gone, she saw an opportunity to seize control, oblivious to the consequences of her actions. Steeling my resolve, I knew I couldn't let her win this battle. Marla had underestimated my determination, and I was prepared to do whatever it took to protect what was rightfully mine and teach her a lesson she wouldn't soon forget. With trembling hands, I poured myself a glass of wine, seeking solace in the familiar warmth of the burgundy liquid. Marla's audacious announcement had left me reeling, but I refused to let her see the depths of my distress. As I settled into the plush chair in my home office, the weight of the evening's events came crashing down. Marla had always been a thorn in my side, her entitled attitude a constant source of friction within our family. But this brazen attempt to seize control of the home Greg and I had built together was a new low, even for her. I took a sip of wine, grimacing at the bitter aftertaste that mirrored the emotions swirling within me. Anger, betrayal, and a burning desire for retribution all vied for dominance, fueling a determination I hadn't felt in years. Memories of past confrontations with Marla flooded my mind, each one a stark reminder of her manipulative nature. The way she had twisted situations to paint herself as the victim, turning Greg against me with her crocodile tears and false accusations. It was a pattern I had foolishly ignored for too long, blinded by my love for Greg and the hope that she would eventually mature. But now, with Greg gone, Marla saw an opportunity to strike, her true colors shining through like a venomous snake shedding its skin. And I, the naive stepmom, had unwittingly played right into her hands by underestimating her ruthlessness. Not this time, Marla, I muttered, downing the rest of my wine with a newfound resolve. You've made your move, but I'm far from checkmate. I knew Marla's financial irresponsibility was her Achilles heel, a weakness I could exploit to turn the tables on her machinations. Greg's will might have been ambiguous about the house, but I had the foresight to protect myself by ensuring any transfer of ownership would be contingent on meeting specific legal conditions. Conditions I knew Marla would struggle to uphold. A sly smile crept across my face as a plan began to take shape. Marla wanted the house? Fine. I would let her have it, but on my terms. And when the time was right, when her reckless spending and entitlement caught up with her, I would be there to watch her crumble under the weight of her own hubris. Revenge, they say, is a dish best served cold. And I intended to make Marla's downfall a deliciously chilling affair, one that would teach her the harsh lessons of karma and consequence, lessons she should have learned long ago. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the scent of determination as I sat across from my lawyer, Sarah, at our favorite local cafe. Her sharp features and no-nonsense demeanor had always put me at ease, a reassuring presence in the face of Marla's escalating antics. "So, let me get this straight," Sarah said, leaning back in her chair and studying me intently. "Marla not only demanded you vacate the house, but her husband had the audacity to imply you're just a temporary guest?" I nodded, my jaw clenching at the memory of Ron's disrespectful words. "That's the gist of it. Marla's made it abundantly clear that she intends to take over the property, regardless of my wishes or the legal implications." Sarah shook her head, a humorless chuckle escaping her lips. "Unbelievable. That girl has always been a piece of work, but this takes the cake." "You're telling me," I agreed, taking a sip of my coffee. "But I'm not about to let her get away with it. I want to explore every legal avenue available to prevent her from pulling this stunt." Sarah's eyes gleamed with a mixture of admiration and determination. "I'm glad to hear it, Della. Frankly, you've been too lenient with her in the past. It's time we fight fire with fire." As Sarah outlined my options, a plan began to take shape. While Greg's will had been frustratingly vague, there were still loopholes I could exploit to maintain control of the situation. If Marla wanted the house so badly, I would let her have it, but on my terms. "Here's what we'll do," I said, leaning forward with newfound conviction. "We'll draft a contract stating that ownership of the property will be transferred to Marla, but with specific conditions tied to the mortgage payments and upkeep costs." Sarah nodded, a sly grin spreading across her face. "I like where you're going with this. We'll include clauses that will be difficult for her to maintain, given her financial irresponsibility." "Exactly," I replied, a sense of satisfaction washing over me. "And when she inevitably fails to meet those conditions, the house will revert back to my control, along with any legal repercussions for her breach of contract." Sarah let out a low whistle, her admiration evident. "Della, you're a force to be reckoned with. I can't wait to see the look on Marla's face when she realizes she's walked straight into your trap." As we hammered out the details, a sense of vindication surged through me. Marla had always underestimated my resilience, mistaking my kindness for weakness. But now, she would learn the hard way that crossing me had severe consequences. "Let the games begin," I muttered, a wry smile playing on my lips as I imagined the look of shock and outrage on Marla's face when she realized the true extent of my machinations. The air was thick with tension as I watched the movers carry box after box into the house I had called home for so many years. Marla's smug expression was a stark contrast to the sadness etched onto her husband Ron's face, a hint of guilt flickering in his eyes as our gazes met. "I hope you're happy now," I said, unable to mask the bitterness in my tone. "You've finally gotten what you wanted." Marla scoffed, tossing her hair over her shoulder with a dismissive flick of her wrist. "Don't be so melodramatic, Della. This is just the natural order of things. You had your time, and now it's ours." I bit back a scathing retort, reminding myself to play along, for now. Sarah's careful legal maneuvering had ensured that Marla's so-called victory would be short-lived, and I intended to savor every moment of her impending downfall. As the last of my belongings were loaded into the moving van, I took one final glance around the house, committing every detail to memory. The walls that had witnessed countless family gatherings, the kitchen where I had prepared countless meals, the living room where Greg and I had spent countless evenings cuddled together on the couch. A pang of sadness tugged at my heart, but I quickly pushed it aside, steeling my resolve. This was no longer my home. It was merely a battlefield, and I was a seasoned warrior, ready to wage war against Marla's hubris. "Well, I suppose this is it," I said, turning to face my stepdaughter with a practiced calm. "The house is all yours, Marla. I hope you'll take good care of it." Marla's lips curved into a smug smirk, her eyes glinting with a sense of triumph that made my blood boil. "Don't worry, Della. I'll make sure to keep everything in tip-top shape. After all, this is my rightful inheritance." I forced a tight smile, resisting the urge to wipe that smug grin off her face. "We'll see about that," I muttered under my breath as I climbed into the waiting van. As we pulled away from the house, I couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation bubbling within me. Unbeknownst to Marla, I had already set the wheels in motion for her inevitable downfall. A quick call to a trusted real estate agent had ensured that the property would be closely monitored, with any potential issues or foreclosure proceedings promptly reported to me. And with the carefully crafted legal conditions Sarah had woven into the transfer agreement, it was only a matter of time before Marla's financial irresponsibility caught up with her. A sly grin spread across my face as I settled into the plush seat of the van, already envisioning the look of shock and dismay on Marla's face when she realized the true extent of my machinations. "Checkmate, my dear," I murmured, watching as the house, and Marla's false sense of victory, disappeared in the rearview mirror. The modest apartment felt like a sanctuary, a haven from the chaos and betrayal that had plagued my life in recent weeks. As I unpacked the last of my belongings, a sense of calm washed over me. A calm that was tempered by a simmering determination to see my plan through to its inevitable conclusion. I had chosen this place strategically, a comfortable yet unassuming abode that would lull Marla into a false sense of complacency. She had always been one to judge based on appearances, and I knew she would revel in the idea of her once formidable stepmother being reduced to such modest living quarters. Little did she know that this was all part of my carefully orchestrated scheme. As I settled onto the plush couch, a wry smile tugged at my lips. Sarah had worked her legal magic, weaving a web of conditions and clauses into the transfer agreement that would prove to be Marla's undoing. It was only a matter of time before her reckless spending habits and financial irresponsibility caught up with her, setting the stage for the ultimate comeuppance. The sound of my phone ringing jolted me from my reverie, and I couldn't help but chuckle as I glanced at the caller ID. It was my trusted real estate agent, Cynthia, the woman tasked with keeping a close eye on the house and any potential issues that might arise. "Hello, Cynthia," I answered, my voice brimming with confidence. "I trust you have some good news for me?" "You know me too well, Della," Cynthia replied, her tone laced with a mixture of amusement and admiration. "It seems your stepdaughter has already started making waves. The bank has been in touch, reminding her about the upcoming loan renewal and the importance of maintaining a spotless credit history." I couldn't help but let out a satisfied chuckle. The loan renewal clause had been a stroke of genius on Sarah's part, a ticking time bomb that would detonate the moment Marla's financial house of cards came crumbling down. "Excellent," I said, leaning back into the couch's plush embrace. "Keep me updated on any developments, won't you, Cynthia? I have a feeling things are about to get very interesting." "You can count on it," Cynthia assured me. "I'll be sure to keep a close eye on the situation and report back any juicy details." As I ended the call, a sense of anticipation coursed through my veins. The trap had been set, and Marla was blissfully unaware of the snare tightening around her. All I had to do now was sit back and wait for her inevitable missteps to trigger the collapse of her ill-gotten gains. With a contented sigh, I reached for the remote control and turned on the television, eager to lose myself in mindless entertainment as the wheels of my revenge continued to turn in the background. "Enjoy your victory while it lasts, Marla," I murmured, a sly grin etching itself onto my features, "because when the dust settles, you'll be the one left picking up the pieces." The sound of shattering glass echoed through the once pristine hallways, punctuated by Marla's shrill screams and Ron's futile attempts to placate her. As I stepped through the front door, the scene that greeted me was one of utter chaos. A stark contrast to the orderly home I had maintained for so many years. "You idiot!" Marla shrieked, her face contorted with rage as she hurled a vase across the room, narrowly missing Ron's head. "How could you let this happen?" Ron cowered like a scolded puppy, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "I'm sorry, babe," he mumbled, his voice trembling with fear. "I thought we had more time to get our finances in order." I cleared my throat, announcing my presence with a calm that belied the inner satisfaction coursing through my veins. "Is everything all right here?" Marla whirled around, her eyes blazing with a mixture of anger and humiliation. "You!" she spat, jabbing an accusatory finger in my direction. "You did this, didn't you? You set us up with those ridiculous loan conditions, knowing we'd never be able to keep up." A wry smile tugged at the corners of my mouth as I took in the scene of Marla's unraveling. The once immaculate living room was a testament to her descent into chaos, with overturned furniture and shattered knickknacks strewn about like casualties on a battlefield. "I have no idea what you're talking about, Marla," I replied, feigning innocence. "This is simply the consequence of your own actions, or should I say, inactions?" Ron's eyes darted between us, a flicker of understanding dawning in their depths. "Babe, maybe she's right," he ventured cautiously. "We've been living way beyond our means, ignoring all the warning signs." Marla's jaw tightened, her nostrils flaring with indignation. "Don't you dare take her side," she hissed, rounding on her husband with a fury that made him flinch. "This is all part of her twisted game. She's been plotting against us from the start." I couldn't help but chuckle at the irony of her words. "You give me far too much credit, Marla," I said, taking a step closer. "The only game being played here is the one you started when you tried to take what wasn't rightfully yours." Realization began to dawn on Marla's face, her eyes widening as the pieces fell into place. The loan renewal clause, the meticulous monitoring of the property's value, the mounting debt that had spiraled out of control, it had all been a carefully orchestrated trap, and she had waltzed right into it. "You knew," she whispered, her voice laced with a mixture of awe and fury. "You knew I'd never be able to keep up with the payments, and you let me take the house anyway." I nodded, savoring the taste of her defeat. "Of course I did, dear. You see, I've learned a thing or two about the consequences of greed and entitlement over the years, lessons that you, unfortunately, have yet to grasp." As Marla sank to the floor, her carefully constructed facade of superiority crumbling around her, I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. The scales of justice had finally been balanced, and the price of her hubris had been paid in full. The air was thick with tension as I surveyed the wreckage of what had once been a pristine living room. Marla sat on the floor, her shoulders slumped in defeat, while Ron hovered nearby, his expression a mixture of guilt and resignation. "Well, well, look at the mess you've made," I said, my voice laced with a mix of triumph and pity. "And to think, this could have all been avoided if you'd just learned to control your entitlement and greed." Marla's head snapped up, her eyes blazing with fury. "Don't you dare lecture me, Della," she spat, her words dripping with venom. "This was all part of your twisted little revenge scheme, wasn't it?" A wry smile tugged at the corners of my mouth as I met her gaze unflinchingly. "Revenge? Now why would I need to seek revenge against my own stepdaughter?" Ron shifted uncomfortably, his gaze darting between us like a spectator at a particularly intense tennis match. Maybe we should all just take a deep breath and... "Shut up, Ron," Marla snarled, cutting him off mid-sentence. "This has nothing to do with you." I couldn't help but chuckle at her outburst. "You see, Marla, that's where you're wrong. This has everything to do with the both of you and your complete disregard for consequences." Marla opened her mouth to retort, but I held up a hand, silencing her. "No, let me finish. For years I've watched you manipulate and scheme, always taking what you wanted without a second thought for the fallout. You tried to turn Greg against me, you tried to take this house that wasn't rightfully yours, and all the while you've been living beyond your means, racking up debt like it was a badge of honor." Ron's brow furrowed as he processed my words, and I could see the realization dawning in his eyes. "Wait, so those loan conditions, the monitoring of the property value, that was all you?" I nodded, a sense of satisfaction washing over me. Indeed it was. I knew Marla's reckless spending habits would eventually catch up with her, so I simply facilitated the process. Marla's face contorted with rage as she struggled to her feet, her fists clenched at her sides. "You manipulative bitch," she seethed, her voice trembling with barely contained fury. "How dare you try to take what's rightfully mine?" I couldn't help but laugh at the irony of her words. "Rightfully yours? Marla, you've never understood the concept of hard work and sacrifice. This house, this life that you so desperately coveted, was built on the foundation of my blood, sweat, and tears. Greg may have left the ownership of this property ambiguous, but he knew in his heart who truly deserved it." As my words sank in, I could see the fight draining from Marla's body, her shoulders slumping in defeat. Ron, ever the passive accomplice, simply stood by silently, his expression a mixture of awe and resignation. "You played me," Marla whispered, her voice barely audible. "You let me think I had won, only to pull the rug out from under me." I nodded. a sense of vindication washing over me. Yes, I did. And you know why? Because sometimes the only way to teach a lesson is through harsh, uncompromising consequences. As I turned to leave, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of pity for the broken woman before me. Marla had been her own worst enemy, her greed and entitlement blinding her to the reality of her actions. But as they say, karma is a bitch, and Marla had just learned that lesson the hard way. The soft ticking of the clock was the only sound that punctuated the silence as I sipped my tea, savoring the warmth and tranquility of my modest apartment. It had been several months since the fateful confrontation that had shattered Marla's delusions of grandeur, and in that time my life had settled into a comfortable routine. A knock at the door jolted me from my reverie, and I couldn't help but feel a twinge of apprehension as I rose to answer it. Peering through the peephole, my breath caught in my throat. It was Marla, looking more disheveled and defeated than I had ever seen her. Steeling my resolve, I pulled open the door, meeting her gaze with a measured calm. "Marla," I greeted, keeping my voice even, "to what do I owe this unexpected visit?" She shifted uncomfortably, unable to meet my eyes. I need your help, Della," she mumbled, the words seeming to stick in her throat. I raised an eyebrow, fighting back the urge to gloat at her admission of vulnerability. "My help? After everything that's happened, you still have the audacity to ask for my assistance?" Marla flinched as if I had struck her, her shoulders slumping in defeat. I know, she said, her voice laced with a weariness that tugged at my heartstrings. "I was a complete monster to you, and I don't deserve your kindness." Sighing, I stepped back and gestured for her to enter. "Well, you might as well come in and explain yourself." As she settled onto the couch, I couldn't help but notice the shadows under her eyes and the pallor of her skin, telltale signs of the stress and turmoil she had endured in recent months. "I've hit rock bottom, Della," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "After losing the house and everything else, Ron left me. My credit score is in shambles, and I can barely make ends meet." A flicker of sympathy stirred within me, tempered by the lingering resentment of her past transgressions. "And what do you expect me to do about it?" I asked, my tone neutral. Marla's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she met my gaze. "I need guidance, Della. I need you to teach me how to pick up the pieces and start over, the right way, this time." For a long moment I studied her, searching for any hint of deceit or manipulation, but all I saw was a broken woman, humbled by the harsh lessons of consequence and karma. Finally I nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. "All right, Marla, I'll help you, but on my terms. This won't be an easy road, and you'll have to follow my lead without question." Relief washed over her features, and she nodded eagerly. "Anything, Della. Just tell me what to do." As I outlined the steps she would need to take, budgeting, rebuilding her credit, finding steady employment, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. Not for the revenge I had exacted, but for the opportunity to guide Marla onto a path of redemption and self-growth. "It won't be easy," I cautioned her. "But if you truly commit to this journey, I promise you'll emerge stronger and wiser than ever before." Marla nodded, her eyes shining with determination. "I'm ready, Della. I've learned my lesson, and I won't squander this second chance." As she left, a weight seemed to lift from my shoulders, replaced by a sense of hope for the future. Revenge might have been the catalyst that set us on this path, but in the end, it was about more than just retribution. It was about teaching the harsh lessons of life and giving someone the opportunity to rise from the ashes of their mistakes, reborn and renewed. And for that, I would always be grateful.